Hello everybody, and welcome to the third video in a series where I've been covering the various skills that we learned in workbook exercise 6. So we're picking up where we left off in the second video, which is step 14, and in this video what we'll do is we'll begin covering how you can create charts while working with pivot tables. Now we've learned how to create charts in previous exercises. However, what we had to do in order to create a chart was oftentimes aggregate. So in the second video I demonstrated how we use that COUNTIF function to count the number of cases within a variable. So we counted the number of Sundays where crimes were reported across days of the week in video 2. However, with pivot tables we don't have to do that. Because we know that pivot tables automatically aggregate for us, we can then use the pivot chart function to easily make a chart. So the first thing I have you do in step 14 is to click that day of the week box and then drag that down to the values box and drop it. And so this is a familiar sight here. You've seen this. So we've got days of the week and we've got counts of incidents that were reported for each day of the week. And so the next thing I have you do is to insert a pivot chart. And so how we do that is we go to our pivot table tools and we click that. Under the Analyze tab here, we can go to the pivot chart function. And so if we click that button, this insert chart dialog box will appear. And this is a dialog box you've seen in the past. As I mentioned in the workbook, we'll stick with this default, which is the clustered column, and we'll just simply click OK. And so when you click OK, we've got a nice column chart or bar chart that populates our screen. So there's a couple of issues with our chart so far. We know that the title's probably not great. We'll want to change that. We'll probably change our axis labels. And if we wanted to use this chart in a report, we probably wouldn't want these buttons in our chart. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of these buttons, which is pretty simple. You just right click on one of them and you select the option to hide all field buttons on chart. And when you do that, those buttons disappear. We know that our title isn't great, so we'll click on it and we will create a new title, and we'll call this Incidents by Day of Week. Alright, so we now have a pretty attractive chart. We've got our bars, we've got our labels here, but we do want to add some axis labels, so let's go ahead and do that. Now I clicked out of my chart, so to bring up that pivot chart tools tab, I could just click it, and then I'm going to go and click the design tab. And over here on the left we're going to have that add chart element option. So I'll click there, scroll down to axis titles, and we'll start with adding a primary horizontal axis title, and we can label this day of the week because that's what's being displayed here. We can go back to add chart element, axis titles, and add a vertical title, and we could call this something like counts of incidents. Alright, so we've got a chart that in previous workbook exercises took us probably like a half an hour to create, done in just a few minutes. So pretty simple when we're working with this pivot charts function. Right, so in the actual workbook, which you've already completed, I asked you to copy and paste this as an image into the report. But since you turned in your exercises already, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this, and we'll move on to step 19, where we're going to be creating a line graph. And so with the line graph, we're going to try to depict trends over the course of the day. And so we'll deselect this day of week option, and we will select hour of day. Right, so we've got that hour of day column that appears here in our pivot table, and again we'll drag that down to our values field. So now we've got counts of incidents per hour of the day here. So a useful way to display this information is through the use or through a visual like a line chart. And so we'll create a line chart next. And so we'll again go up to our pivot table tools under the Analyze tab. We'll click the pivot chart option, And so the default here is this column chart, but we want to switch this because we're going to make a line chart here this time. So let's click the line option here under the all charts pane, and we'll go ahead and we'll stick with the default here, just a standard line chart, and we'll click OK. And when we do, we see the trends over the course of the day. Right, so we've got the different hours of the day being depicted, and we have the counts of crime that are occurring during each hour. So we can see this trend here. So again, we'll want to clean this chart up. So we'll get rid of these buttons here. We'll pretend we were going to insert this chart in a report. So we'll hide those buttons. You'll see, and this may or may not happen, but right now we've got a blank field here, and we really don't want that. So what we can do to get rid of that, you'll see that's in the row labels column. Right, that has appeared here. So if we have this pop up, all we've got to do is click the row labels drop-down menu and deselect blank and click OK. Right, so that'll get rid of that blank field. So again, we'll want to add some chart elements. Right, so we'll start by adding our axis titles. So this would be hour of the day is on our horizontal axis. We can go back up to add chart element, axis titles, and then choose a vertical one. And we could change this title to something along the lines of number of incidents. We know that this title isn't great, so we'll change this to incidents reported per hour of day. And we've got a pretty attractive chart that we can now add into a report if need be. Right, so again, in step 20 of the workbook, I ask you to take this chart and to copy and paste it as an image. Of course, we already completed this workbook, so you're not going to have to do that right now. And so finally, we get to step 21, which is the last step of this particular exercise. And I ask you for 3 different charts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to pause here and complete those charts, right? Put them together. And then unpause me, and let's see if you got it right. Alright, so hopefully you've taken the time to create your charts. And so I'm just going to delete this one that I created from the previous step. And I'm also going to clear my boxes here so I can work on subsection A of step 21. So in subsection A, I ask you to provide me with a column chart showing the counts of reports for each crime type. And so what we're going to work with here is the first offense. So we'll add this to our pivot table and then add this to our values box. And again, a familiar sight here. We've got the counts of these various different crime types. And what we can do is click on the Pivot Tables Tool tab. Under the Analyze tab, we can go over to Pivot Chart. We can select this clustered column chart that we worked with. This is the default. We can click OK. And what we'll see is we've got the chart being automatically generated. So I'm again going to clean this up by getting rid of these field buttons. I'm going to get rid of that blank category. And I'm going to change my title. And I'll call this something along the lines of incident reports by crime type. Go ahead and add those axis labels. My apologies, I selected the wrong option there. Our axis titles we'll want to add. First, our horizontal ones. We could call this something along the lines of crime category. We'll call this crime type, actually. We could add an axis title for our vertical. Call this number of incidents. And again, we've got an attractive chart that we can then add to a report if necessary. Alright, and in subsection, or in substep B for question, or step number 21, I ask you to create a pie chart that depicts the breakdown of violent and property crimes. So I'll again go ahead and delete this here. I'm going to get rid of everything in my pivot table, and I'm going to go ahead and click the category box. Right, so remember, the category indicates whether a crime was a violent crime or a property crime. I can already see that I've got this blank field here, so I'm going to get rid of that right away so I don't have to deal with it later. I'm going to click and drag category down to our values field, values box, and you'll see we've got the breakdown of the property crimes and violent crimes in our hypothetical jurisdiction. And so I'm going to go ahead and go back up to pivot table tools. I'll go to pivot chart. I'm going to select the option for a pie chart, and I'm going to click OK. And you'll see we've got a pie chart here, but we don't have, or we do have these buttons that we want to get rid of again, so we'll do that. We'll again change this title. Call this something along the lines of incident reports by crime category. You can see we've got a legend here where we've got our property crimes being shown in blue and our violent crimes being shown in orange. I probably wouldn't stick with this color scheme unless maybe my police department's color was orange and blue. I'd probably change this up to make it look more professional, but we don't need to spend time focusing on that. What I'm going to do next, though, is I'm going to add some labels to my chart. And so although this provides us some information, right, we see that we actually have more, looks like a little bit more violent crime than property crime, and in fact that is the case. But this really isn't that informative. So what I would do is I would add some labels. So I'll make sure I've got the pivot chart tools selected and select data labels. And we've got a couple of options. We could put the counts inside the actual slices of pie. We could put them inside at the end, outside, best fit. And really this is kind of a personal preference. I'm going to go ahead and put it on the inside center. Alright, so again, we've got a chart that we could then add to a report if we wanted to. And so finally we will work on step 21 subsection C, and here we're looking for a column chart showing the number of arrests that each officer made. And so for this particular chart we're going to be working with that reporting officer variable. So again, I'm going to get rid of this chart that I've made here. Just go ahead and delete this. Click on my pivot table, get rid of the category label, and I'm going to click reporting officer and drag that down to the values box. So here we've got a breakdown of the number of incident reports that each officer took. So it appears here that we've got some officers who are pretty active, like Officer James, who has the most incident reports, and it looks like Officer Clark might be shirking his or her duties because they only filled out 28 reports during this whole time period. And so to view this information visually, we can again use our pivot table tools tab. Under the Analyze tab, go to Pivot Chart. We are looking for a column chart here, so I'm going to stick with this default and click Enter. Again, I'm going to remove the buttons. I'm going to get rid of this blank category. And you could go ahead and add the various elements. I won't do that because I've already walked through that twice already now. So you know it has to be included in your chart. Right, so this is going to bring us to the end of workbook exercise 6. I hope this was a good refresher for you. I know you've been out of class for a couple of weeks now. So I look forward to Tuesday and getting back to class, getting back into the swing of things. So take care of yourselves, make sure you're staying at home, keeping your social distance, and I'll look for you on Tuesday when we get into the midterm project. Take care, everyone.